Yeah, it is pretty dark. Um, okay, welcome to Avoiding Culture Shock. And I'm going to talk a bit about how to make your app ready for international markets. First off, I'm Daniel Munoz. You can find me with my Twitter handle, Macias. And right now, I am part of the iOS team in Lovu, in the beautiful city of Dresden in Germany. Oh, what's up here? No, there, yeah. Uh, so why am I talking about this? I was born and raised in Bolivia. And before moving to Germany, I had the opportunity to work as a freelance developer for quite some years. And I worked with different clients that were located in the US, in Europe, and obviously in South America. And I was able to see particular differences in their cultures related to people and also how their users interact with like the whole development process and the feedback and everything within the apps. Let's start with the agenda for today. We're gonna talk about culture shock and localization and culturalization. Quick disclaimer, since this is a lightning talk or light talk and it's after lunch, I'm gonna try to keep it not technical and more like experience and like more easy to go after lunch. So let's start with culture shock. Some of you probably have experienced culture shock in the past, but what it really is. If we take a look at the definition, we can see that culture shock is supposed to be the feeling of uncertainty or confusion that is experienced by someone when they are suddenly exposed to an unfamiliar culture. Okay, we have three things that we can take from here, which are uncertainty, confusion, and being exposed to an unfamiliar culture. This is fairly easy to understand, but I also bet that probably most of you have traveled to countries where you don't speak the language. That's pretty normal, I guess. And probably some of you also moved to a country where they don't speak your own language. And that's not an easy thing. I've done that, and trust me, it's really not easy. And by getting these three things that we get from the definition, I can tell you one story about when was the first time that I really experienced culture shock. And it's a tale about the time I went to Japan. I always wanted to go to Japan. I always wanted to go to Tokyo. And a few years ago, I managed to go to Japan. And I really loved it. The place was awesome. It was just as I imagined or better. The people there are wonderful. And one thing that struck me a little bit weird was that people mostly don't speak English there. I lived, I guess, in a bubble thinking that as long as I speak English, I can do whatever I want anywhere in the world. But unfortunately for Japan, that's not true. And one day that I was walking on a neighborhood that looked exactly like this, I was hungry. It was around noon, and I wanted some nice Japanese food. So I was wandering around these restaurants, and I was faced with machines that looked like this to order the food. And I said, okay, how hard can it be to order the food? I'm supposed to be a tech guy. I usually understand these kind of things. Even though it's not in English or any other language I can understand, you have images of the dishes that you might want to eat, so it should be okay, right? But unfortunately, no. After many tries, I was just getting errors and what I think it's error messages because the colors and the things that I was seeing on the screen. And after many tries, I just realized that I was lost. And then I thought that, okay, I'm gonna die of starvation. And no spoilers, but I'm alive, as you can see. And thankfully, there was this person there that probably was looking at me in front of the machine, I guess about to cry or something with a big question mark on my face. And he helped me out. And I was able to order my food and enjoy a delicious meal. And yeah, I didn't have internet or anything on my phone in that trip, so Google Translate was not an option. But anyway, that time I felt these three things. I was super confused. I didn't understand anything. I was exposed to a very, very different culture than my original culture. And definitely, I felt uncertainty. I wasn't sure if I was going to survive. Um, but these feelings are something that you don't want your users to feel in your app. One thing is to feel it if you travel somewhere, but if your app is using something you created, then you don't expect them to feel like foreigners in your own app. So this takes us to the second point of the agenda, and we're going to talk about localization and culturalization. We'll begin with a little bit of localization. I don't want to get technical with this because there's plenty of resources online about localization. A lot of people talk about localization, and I'm pretty sure all the people here in this room know about what it is, how it works. But let's very quickly look at an example. Here we have a label. We set up a hard-coded string, which is, everybody knows, a bad thing to do. The compiler cannot translate it magically. We're not there yet. But it's super easy to localize this. We just need to add it to the string file. And it has to have a key. We can use NS-localized strings. And we can have our app ready for this localization. But this doesn't translate the things for us. This is just using this kind of technology. And what's happening behind the scenes is that after you create these string files, you have to send it to the translators. And they will translate to whatever languages you want, and they will give you this file in different versions. And you have to add it back to your app. And then is where the magic happens, and your app will start showing the correct words for different languages. And let me show you one example in a production app. This is the app that I work on. It's called Lavu. This app started off as a dating app for the German-speaking markets, and now has evolved into a platform that wants to bring people together. And this is not just in the dating space. When we wanted to bring this product to any market that is not our main language, that is German, or the default that is English, we have to localize it and we need to translate it. One example of this is, for example, here, Italian. We have the same app, the same screenshot here, and you can notice that the strings were localized here. Words were translated, but context is very important as well. We can focus a little bit here on the bottom part of it, and you can see that some of the words were translated and some weren't, and this is why context is important. Because live and match, for example, can be easily understood in many languages like Italian. So there are many things that, depending on the context, don't need to necessarily be translated. That was a quick peek into localization, but now let's take a bigger look into culturalization and why it's important. The definition is that culturalization is the process of adapting to one's cultural environment. This is super, super important for an app because we don't want the users to feel that they're out of place and that they don't belong to the users, or that this app was designed for someone else, that it's not them. So I have another example. I have a few examples more here. We're back at Lavu. Here we have a feature that is called Live. And in Live, we have communities that are created around people, that these people are streaming different content, such as their daily lives, painting, or live concerts. And we wanted to, for example, roll out this feature to Turkey and to have it available in Turkish. So we did the first thing that we are supposed to do, which is translate the app. And so we had translations for everything. Here you can see in better detail, the app is translated. And we can take a look at the profiles here. Those are streamers. And there are these top badges that the streamers have. And these are badges that streamers win after they become successful and they achieve certain goals. And when we roll this feature in Turkey, something interesting happened, something that we haven't seen in other markets. Turns out that our users in Turkey were very confused about the top batch or the top streaming feature. And turns out that in Turkish, the term top is used as an offensive way to refer to a gay man. So well, not us, we, but definitely that's not something that you want your users to feel. You don't want to use offensive terms or slur to refer to them. And this is the kind of things that you won't find on the dictionary, maybe on the Urban Dictionary or something like it. But it's part of the culture and part of how they express normally. So what we did was try to fix this mistake, and we use a better term for top, and turns out that in Turkish is üst. I have no idea how you pronounce that, but that's the word. And we change it for the Turkish market. Here you can see a little bit more detail. So you can imagine how an innocent term like is top, and it's something that we use all over. We have top for everything, and how a word like this can have a negative connotation if you are not aware of different peculiarities of the country you are trying to roll your app in. And well, yeah, now we have two versions. Both versions are translated, and we are not offending anyone anymore. And let me show you a few more examples. Here, for example, we have Google Maps. This is the artwork that they use for the App Store. And as you can see, they didn't just translate the description that they have for the app. Here we are seeing the version for Brazil and the version for Germany. And in the version for Brazil, you can see things that would be normal to see in Brazil, like that background is a city in Brazil. You can see the screenshot of the Google Maps that you can see Sao Paulo there. And for the German market, you can see a Currywurst cart there, which is pretty common in Germany. And also, I think you can see a location in Germany there. So the idea is that you need to make sure that your users feel like they belong to the app, and that this app was not designed for another kind of culture or another kind of person. And this goes to everywhere. I guess if you download an app and all the assets are, not just because of the language, but I don't know, for example, when I was living in Bolivia and I would see Asian marketing in an app, it's something that I might not be interested because it's not tailored for me, or I was not the original audience. So it's something very important. And culturalization is very important, not just in our industry, and I'll show you some examples that how this is important in different industries. Here we can take a look at the Pixar movie Inside Out. I'm pretty sure most of you have watched it. Basically, here we are seeing a scene where the characters are looking into a sports game. For the English-speaking version, specifically for the US version, we see a game of hockey, and because hockey is a very popular sport there. But for the international version, they use football, which is a much more relatable sport to see. For example, in South America and Europe, it's much easier that you're going to be watching a football game than a hockey game. Here's another example of the same movie, and this is Inside Out as well. We have broccoli and bell pepper. And in this scene, they are feeding one of the characters a vegetable that they don't like. Turns out in the US, most kids don't like broccoli, but that's not the same in Japan. In Japan, usually kids like broccoli, so they use bell pepper, which is something that they usually don't like. And Pixar usually goes many steps forward in order to try to really accommodate to their audience. And the last example is in the movie Coco. Probably some of you have watched this movie, and if don't, you should see it because it's very amazing. It's one of my favorites. And there's a funny thing related to the Brazilian market. In Brazil, it's not called Coco, it's called Viva. And the reason why they call it Viva, it is because it turns out that in Portuguese, with a slight variation in the accentuation on the last O, that instead of coco, it's coco, coco becomes poop. Yeah. And it makes sense that the people at Pixar didn't want their good abuelita to be called poop. So these are a few examples on why localization, culturalization are very important for our users. Again, I reiterate that it's very important to make our users feel welcome every time that they join our app. And to finish it up, a little bit of a summary. What should we do? We should always be aware of localization. We should always be aware of culturalization. And the reason for this is to avoid culture shock. And don't forget to localize, and to localize well, not just localize. Always remember that it's not just translation. You have to go beyond translation and make sure that the context and the cultural aspect is always taken into account. And this difference will really make make your app very special, and the users will not just delete it because they feel like they're a foreigner there. And thank you.